Good evening, and welcome to the first of the Exemplar talks. The Exemplar talks are designed to go with the exhibition which Design for London have put on, London Open City. The general concept is to work out how we're going to use London better and work out how we're going to use the squares, the public spaces, the streets and the public realm in a more effective way. Tonight is the first of these debates. We've got 3 debates running. The first is between Lord Rogers and Pasqual Maragall, and they're going to lead a discussion called Connect. We've got a further 2 debates which are coming up over the course of the next month. The first one will be Jaime Lerner will be joining us from Curitiba in Brazil to discuss activation of public spaces. And secondly, we've got Marjorie Carter coming from New York, and she'll be talking about the potential for the regeneration of South Bronx, which she's worked on over many years. And she'll be leading a debate on integration. From my perspective as a private property developer, the way in which we're going to use London over the next 10, 20 years is very important. And as multi-use development intensifies and as the population grows, the way in which we use our public space is incredibly important. So this is a fascinating debate for me, for sure. I'll hand over to Peter Bishop, Director of Design for London, who's going to chair tonight's discussion.
Thanks very much. It's an informal evening, so I'm going to talk and sit at the same time rather than stand up. I've also got to remind you, please, mobile phones, if you could switch them off now, so have an uninterrupted session. We've got about an hour and a half, and it's a very informal meeting and a chance really of a discussion between 2 individuals who have in their own way shaped 2 cities which are very, very similar. Between Pasqual Maragall, who was the mayor of Barcelona from 1982, and one of the individuals who shaped the city, who put together the vision for the city that transformed it in the post-Franco era to become a modern European city that hosted the Games and then moved on to become one of the great, great cities of Europe, one of the great champions of design. And Richard Rogers. I mean, Richard doesn't need any introduction at all. One of the world's great architects, but also an architect who's moved to become one of the great thinkers in terms of the way cities operate and work. And also an advisor to Ken Livingstone as mayor to London. And also the individual whose drive ultimately resulted in the setting up of Design for London. We've got our Open City exhibition downstairs. I hope if you haven't seen it, you get the chance to see it. It's an attempt to move into the very, very difficult realm for us, where we're trying to communicate to anybody from architect to an academic to a 5-year-old child the wonder of what makes cities great, great places to explore. With the sole objective that if somebody walks through the exhibition and walks outside into London and looks at it in a slightly different way, we'll be absolutely delighted with the result of that. And we're delighted to have Exemplar here with us to actually sponsor these talks as a way of actually extending the debate, which London Open City is very much the beginning of rather than the end of. And finally, we're very interested really in the lessons we can learn from other cities, particularly Barcelona, in particular from Pasqual, who's had this career which is quite rare by English standards or British standards, which has moved almost effortlessly from the political to the academic to the shaping of cities, which in some ways has mirrored Richard's career from reaching the pinnacle of his profession to becoming involved in advising the mayor of London, actually thinking academically and intellectually the way in which cities operate. So that is a way of introduction. I was just going to sort of start the conversation really with asking Pasqual possibly just to tell us the story of how from 1982 Barcelona, through your leadership, fashioned the vision that led to the Olympics and led to the re-establishment of Barcelona as one of the world's great cities.
Well, you know, Barcelona was a city that needed that in a way, because Barcelona was the first of the cities of the world being bombed from the air by a German fascist Spanish fascist aviation. Okay? And it was really in bad shape. Not in 1992, much before that, in 36 and 39. But yet, in the first years of recovery, the process was very slow. Then, in the years, in the decade of the 50s and then of the 60s, over 2 million people came up in a city of 3. So now the metropolitan area of Barcelona is more than 4, close to 5 million people, perhaps a little bit less. And that was due to a tremendous migration from the south of Spain, not from Africa, that's now, not then. And Barcelona needed, in a way, one object, one objective to be centered, to be, to be purposeful and efficient. And the games were that. The idea of setting the games was very much in the tradition of Barcelona, which is being the capital of Catalonia or Spain, of the world, or whatever, according to the existence of an event, in a moment, okay? And that has always been so. And Barcelona was very important in 1888, and then in 1929 because of universal exhibitions, and 1992 was then the big occasion in the 20th century, the biggest one, for the city to, to make a tremendous leap ahead. The amount of money we were investing, it was in the order of 20 billion pounds. 20 billion pounds we invested in, let's say, 15 years, before and just after the games. Thanks to the games, thanks to the fact that there was that event, and that Spain then had to concede, let's say, or accept that Barcelona needed that.
In terms of the success, whereas I think people would say Sydney was very successful in terms of the games, right, but not necessarily in terms of reshaping the capital. But Barcelona seems to have been probably the only example I can think of where a city has put on an excellent sporting event, an excellent games, but also is seen almost as the benchmark upon which other cities have to judge the marker upon which other cities gauge their success. What was unique about Barcelona?
Probably it was the atmosphere, the spirit of it, because, as I said, if Barcelona lived on events as an alibi to be better than it was, or something, the event became the religion of Barcelona, so to speak. The very same shared consciousness that was the moment when we had to jump, okay? And that was shared. The moment when Barcelona in 1986 was elected in Lausanne to be the siege of the 1992 Olympic Games, it was terrible. All of Barcelona came up. There is a famous picture of a lady shouting in the balcony of La Ramblas and saying, "Thanks God," and so on. And that thanks God of that woman in La Ramblas was Barcelona's shout or cry or whatever in that moment. Because in a way, people felt that that was it. That Barcelona then was going to, project herself or itself as a leading city or a city that would be not the first, but itself. Would accomplish its dream. That was probably the word.
And Richard, to what extent was the London bid influenced by Barcelona and its approach?
Barcelona was the pinnacle of urban regeneration. It got the gold medal for the urban renaissance, urban regeneration. Part of this was because it got, I think, the right balance between the Olympics and the legacy. And it recognized that the Olympics were the lever towards change. But it's only for 3 weeks, and the legacy is measured in hundreds of years. It also, I think, it suffered what most industrial cities have suffered, which is the port, which was its lifeblood, which is economic and in a sense cultural lifeblood, had shrunk as our own port here on the Thames, to a point where the city was completely separated from the most beautiful oil it has, which is the sea, by dereliction. And that's pretty comparable with the East End. I mean, it's not the sea, it's the Thames, but it is also the poorest area, which is actually a bit better than Barcelona. When I was involved right at the beginning, by Prescott, when I was working on the Urban Task Force, and he asked me, what's the best example of the Olympics? And obviously the Urban Renaissance, which he, being the minister I was responsible for when we did the report towards an Urban Renaissance. And I said, Barcelona is by far the best. It's the goal level. And he said, well, what I want London to be is better. That's a very important aim. The competition is, like Madrid and Barcelona. Competition, of course, can be good. It's very good. So you have a measuring level. Whether we'll be better, that'll have to be a long time. But having said that, I also remember telling Prescott what Pasqual had told me before, which is it takes at least 15 years to deliver something which is of a sizable urban regeneration change. It's not, urban regeneration is, by its very nature, piece by piece. It's not something you can't draw it suddenly. You do it bit by bit. And I think we learned a lot from that. We learned very much the concept that, what we're trying to do at one level is we're trying to make it the most, London or Barcelona, the most beautiful city on the Mediterranean, the most beautiful city in Britain, Europe, whatever level you want to do. You want to make the city which is most socially inclusive. The woman who yells from the balcony. This is social inclusion, the pride, and also the fact that it's part of the social. And of course, you have to make it environmentally responsible. Those three elements, which we also see in Barcelona, we're trying to capture here.
And in terms of the similarities, because Richard, you've worked with Pascal, haven't you, in Barcelona and actually advised. And there's a real similarities between the approach in Barcelona and the approach that London's taking around the regeneration, around brownfield land, around densification, around reconnection with the sea or the river in our case. To what extent was this influenced by, have you been influenced by the Barcelona experience?
It's very much about the process. It clearly are so many lessons. Again, not at one level, one is one of the most amazing things for me when I went to Barcelona, apart from the fact that nobody ever goes to bed in Barcelona, which I'm so impressed, that they can actually sort of seem to do a 24-hour day, with a vitality where nothing starts to open until, I have to quickly say that the first time that I wanted to meet this extremely important mayor, Pasqual, and I was actually, I think, in that moment in Rome. And I phoned up and I said, I really would like to meet you, and I'm Richard Rogers and so on. And he said, and I'm only there for 2 days. And he said, I'm very busy indeed, but I'd really like to meet you. He said that. And he said, we'll have to find a time. And he said, the only time I can meet you is very late in the evening. I said, so I'm Italian, what's late? So we said, well, we'll meet at 12:30 at the restaurant at night. So that was our first meeting, if I remember rightly. So there is a sort of tremendous vitality, which I think London has caught. I do think in the last 10 years, especially the last 10 years, there's been a sort of continental atmosphere in London. It has, much thanks to them, for all the people who come from abroad and the ease with which we go abroad. But there has been a tremendous influence on all that. But to one physical point I'll bring up, it's interesting to think that Barcelona is the densest city in Europe, and more or less nothing is above 8 stories. And that tells you a lot. In other words, the relationship with that density has very little to do with height, which we always get muddled up in this country. I'm not saying we should be high or low, I'm just making a point. And that in that sense, these great avenues and these great blocks of development with their corners cut off is fantastic private-public concept and relationship. And the CEDRA plan is amazing. So, of course, one studies the CEDRA plan, one studies the way that they develop the water side, the way that they get the park along it, the way that they've got live, work, leisure, and the way that they're doing what they're trying to do, like all the rest of us, to ameliorate those who are less fortunate than ourselves.
Is that one of the reasons why public space is so important in your policies when you were mayor in Barcelona?
Yes, of
One
course.
of the cornerstones.
I have to say that it is good that we, fight each other a little bit.
Of course.
No, the difference between Barcelona and London is there are many. One is the size of it. Barcelona is very small, so the city,
Well, not
proper,
very.
the municipality, not the metropolitan area. Then metropolitan area, 4 million people, so one would be not similar, but almost. But City Hall, Barcelona, is only 100 square kilometers, so it's 20,000 inhabitants in the square kilometer. So it's a tremendous density. It's downtown London, if you want, or even more dense, of course, than downtown London. Now, Barcelona was at the same time not a capital. You are a capital. Barcelona is not. Even if you have a similarity, which is that the mayor of London is not in very good terms with nation. That's happened in Barcelona too. This is similarity, but still you are the capital of one of the most important nations in the world. Okay, if you rank cities, capital cities in Europe, well, first of all, it's London. I mean, in terms of wealth, growth, universities, and so on and so forth. Second is Paris, third is Frankfurt, fourth is a fight between Madrid and Barcelona, of course. Now, our situation is completely different. The good thing about the love affair between London and Barcelona was precisely that they had nothing to do with. I mean, the first time I came here was in the first time not, but the first time that as mayor of Barcelona, Barcelona was present here was in '87 probably, with Merlin Macaulay and that exhibition of Barcelona in London. Because that was the first moment in which Barcelona spoke to the world. Barcelona came to London to tell the world we are that, we are there, and we're doing that and this, okay? And that was a great success. When we came with Diana, we were remembering the first time we came to talk about cities and so on. And it was 87 probably, or 88, 87 probably. That was a success. And for Barcelona was a tremendous leap ahead. Then there's a person before I finish that I would like to know, to mention, which is Bob Hughes. You know, the Australian writer. Because he produced a book on Barcelona. He was in love with Barcelona. And he produced a book on Barcelona, which even having some misgivings in a way, because he's not a Barcelona citizen, is probably one of the books that had best understood what the saga, the history, of Barcelona was and is in a way. No? I would like to recommend you that book. It's called Barcelona. Robert Hughes. He's Australian. He lives in America, but he knew Barcelona. He described it in very many terms, in cultural, political, and social terms. Tremendous. I mean, in an exceptional way. I recommend you.
Can I pick up this point? One of the things in terms of learning from Barcelona, our major development is not in but whereas Barcelona development has been basically along the sea edge. Of course, there's been a tremendous improvement throughout the rest of Barcelona, public spaces and so on. But that's the major element. Ours is going to be in the East End. But the critical part for what we've termed as City East, which is basically Lee Valley, Canary Wharf, Woolwich on that side, is that it should have the density of a Barcelona. the density of a real piece of London, of Notting Hill Gate. And that's, when I say density, I'm not talking about height. It's the vitality and the number of people, and also the public spaces. I mean, the Lee Valley certainly could be equivalent of, as I say, the Olympic Village along the coast of Barcelona. So that idea of the vitality, of the live, work, leisure vitality is what one would like to see, the work that we're doing down in the Lee Valley. The next thing I'd like to say is that on the basis that it's really the quality of a city is measured by public space. The culture of the city is measured by public, and it has always been there. I mean, you know, if you go to look at the models of Hellenic Athens, I mean, the sort of, or Rome and so on, it's the agora, the public spaces that talk to one. And in a way, this is what Barcelona has done so successfully, especially along the sea edge. And we too are now trying to interpret that concept within London, so as to make it not only tremendously financial centre, but a place which is has really wonderful, beautiful public spaces. I keep on using the word, I tell the story again, beauty. When we wrote the Urban Task Force report, and I remember we wrote the word beauty, I was told by the senior civil servant that if I wanted to be taken seriously, I should not, by the government, I should not use the word beauty. So I've been doing this ever since I've used the word beauty consistently.
Just pick up the question of beauty, but one of the extraordinary successes of Barcelona was, it's one thing to fashion a political vision and even a physical vision about public space, but what you also achieved was to promote the highest quality in innovation design. I get interested, Pasquale, if you could just tell us the story about where that came from as vision. How did you link beauty in with your political and physical vision, and how did you achieve it in terms of the mechanics?
Well, because the saga of Barcelona, the spirit of Barcelona, if such a thing exists, is linked not only to physical reality, which was always problematic, or political power, which was many times absent, or even lacking, but quality, in quality. So Barcelona excelled in what she could excel, which was neither power nor size, so to speak, but quality in a way. And architects have become to be, for a while, they said against me, that architects were ruling the city. Of course, I had some architects working with me, not only as architects, but also as counselors, like Oriol Boigas, or writers, like Maria Aurelia Campmany. Why? Because, of course, culture and design was our way of life. No, our way of being competitive. And that is why. I mean, this doesn't mean that Barcelona didn't try to have power, let's say. Barcelona has had a tremendous power fight and competition in economic and in political terms with Madrid, as you know, which is the capital town, and of course a big and tremendously successful town nowadays also, no? But Barcelona tried to make of architecture and of design, and if you want, also of literature, poetry, and cinema, and all of that, it's, strength. It's one of its strengths.
But that's where we failed, I have to say. We are so far.
Come on, don't be too...
Yes, we have. The big thing we haven't learned from you is how to capture that quality of design.
Yeah.
And I say design, the culture of design as well. And the fact that that you, specifically with Boigas, with that culture, were able to drive that concept. I have to say, as I write regularly, if you take a trip down the Thames, you are appalled at what we've done to this most beautiful valley of the Thames Valley from Tower Bridge downwards. It is appalling. We haven't got... That's the big jump. There is a need First of all, to realize that we can't have, I think when I counted it, there are 50 bodies empowered along the Thames. I'm told there's only 35. But anyhow, it's a hell of a lot of bodies, and then no one knows where it is at the top. And if no one knows where it is at the top, actually nobody else can feed in. You can't have public participation if there isn't a structure to public to participate into. So you need someone who's making decisions. You had one of the great people of culture and architects in Royal Bodegas. You also had a team around it. We just can't do that. I don't know why, but this is the failure. And this is what we really have to improve. If I had to get a message at the moment, I'd say get together a small group of people with vision, where everybody feeds into. And in that small people, there has to be a really capable politician, and there has to be a really capable architect. Otherwise, you've got very little.
You're right, yes. But no, I would say we were favored by the fact, in that sense, by the fact that we had to be very good in design, as I said before, but also because we saw very clearly what the problems were. I mean, Barcelona was separated from the sea by the railway, because the first railway track in Barcelona was 1848, Barcelona-Mataró, in Spain, I mean, was Barcelona-Mataró. And then the port was a tremendous, not open to the city place, belonging to the nation state, okay? So that the fight of Barcelona was to overcome these two things. And the big thing we did, probably, in those 15 years I was mayor, probably the most important thing was pulling the railway track away and getting, again, Barcelona together with the sea.
Yeah.
Open the Barcelona. Because I remember the day I pulled out ¿cómo se dice? Una vía de tren.
The railway.
Yeah,
The
but
railway
just
line.
a piece, one
The
piece,
railway line.
because if you take out one, the train goes bananas. I mean, I cannot go anymore. And that was the first line in Spain in 1848, Barcelona-Mataró. So that the fight against Renfe, which is the railway company in Spain and the state, was tremendous, because what do you mean? In Barcelona-Mataró, you cannot take that out. And I said, come on, go around. I mean, we need to go to be in touch with the sea. And that days, pulling out one piece of it, it was over. They couldn't go anymore there. I had the alliance of Boixadors, was the president of Renfe, of the company, of the Spanish company of trains, was a Catalan, Boixadors, and on top of that he was from the Empordà, which is the northern part of Catalonia, which they are very crazy and, and very bold. So that he did it as president, and we took that out. From that moment on, Barcelona changed completely. I mean, because its relationship with the sea was completely new. Then we made the Olympic port. The Olympic port became something that Barcelona had never had, which was a pleasant port, which is very difficult to have in an industrial city like that. Now, all the dreams that were, drawn in the 50 years before suddenly came up as a reality, began to come up as a reality. And then the rondas, the beltway. That was a terrible thing terribly necessary to have. The beltway in Barcelona meant, Barcelona not being London, the density prevents it of having, nice communication. And the beltway of Barcelona was, I think, the most important of our achievements, because that, of course, that needed a bold government to decide, because you had to buy up land which was very densely populated, and you had to fight against the port authority to put the maritime part, close to the port, part of the rondas, the beltway. That was very, very important. And I think if you have to find the keys of what was important in Barcelona probably, and that was the main public work, the rondas.
Perhaps the most
Changed the life of the city. Sorry.
Perhaps the most important thing that we have learned from Europe, but very much from you, is the importance of having a mayor and the idea of having someone that encapsulates the vision of a city. And I remember we attended the Architectural Foundation debates, which Lucy had organized with Ricky, and you were there, and Tony Blair, and that was the moment that Tony Blair announced for the first time that it would be a mayor of London. There has been some friction, but also there is a realization that the mayor, Ken, is the only really popular person in the Labour Party. I think he's 15% above, I gathered in the latest polls, above the standing of the Labour Party, even if there may be some problems at the next election. But he has encapsulated a certain vision. And through that vision, and this is what I think is very important, and in that sense has been a tremendous success, has come a whole series of policies, starting with that the green belt will contain London. There will be no sprawl outside it. There will be no new towns. All development will be on brownfield land, on recycled land, in recycled buildings. The whole growth of the next, whatever it is, 800,000 people over the next 15 years is all going to be in that. The growth of public space will again be a regeneration what is already buildings and land that already exist. The policy of congestion charging, the policy of 40 to 50% affordable housing. These have all come out of we'll call it a mayoral vision. It comes out of an urban task force it comes out but Ken has actually delivered that. So in that sense, I think we have learned about the power of a mayor, and certainly this is very new for England.
Well, the story of the GLC and its disappearance and its recovery, it's a romantic one. Wow. Well, it's something that we share. I mean, all cities in Europe share that story. It's our story because it's a story of proximity and local rule and togetherness against just power, abstract power, which is the nation, if you want. Nation is such a powerful idea that many times it swallows all the other realities, like local life, like togetherness, like proximity, all the other values which are very important. Nationalism and nation is a way of doing things simpler. I mean, without that, we couldn't we couldn't live in a world, of course. But I think nations have, in many ways, abused cities and proximity. Hopefully, the existence of Europe is going to probably put things again in another footing, because if your flag, your army, and your money, well, not you because you are so, English, so special, but because we have euros and we cannot buy things in the street. But the fact that those things that finally are those who define the unity of the place where you live are European in Europe, for most Europeans, is very important, because now Europe is something which is of the same size of, let's say, of the same level of wealth of America, of the United States of America, I mean, and with an advantage, which is having the same per capita income, the dispersion, how do you call that? The difference between the top and the low levels is much higher in America than it is in Europe. So that means that Europe is like America, but fairer in terms of distribution. Okay, I hope that Obama will help.
Yes,
I am very much in favor of Obama, and I will be there in the election day to
But again, we've learned very much about the whole concept of regions, the importance of regions, especially from Spain.
Yeah, yeah.
The city-state, that is, in the center tends to be much more bureaucratic. If you can get, again, the mayor, the regions on, there is the possibility of cutting through the bureaucracy, of having a more visible leadership and participating within the scale, of a more understandable scale.
And of course, because in Spain you cannot understand Spain. Spain, like you, Spain and Great Britain are the countries where you have one state and several nations, so to speak, or several nationalities. No? I don't want to get into that because probably it's very controversial, but I think that is also a very good thing about Europe. Europe is like America, as I said, with less dispersion in distribution of wealth and with not one but 20 languages in 30 countries. Okay? So that Europe being more diverse than America is in a way, is more difficult to manage, but it's more able to understand what diversity is and therefore what the world is. So Europe is in much better condition than the United States of America to understand the rest of the world, and you have proofs of that all the day. Not because of Europe is very efficient, but because the United States are such an inefficient big power. Not because they are Americans, but because they are the power. And because they are, in a way, much less diverse than Europe is. So Europe is now approaching a moment in which probably we'll have to do more things at the world level. Take the papers today and see the Dalai Lama and the problems it has and so on. All of that, not all of that, but part of that derives from the fact that the big power in the world is not behaving as it should. And does that have anything to do with cities? I think it has. Cities in America are not that important. In America, New York, we have lived 2 years in New York, okay? And New York was considered to be Sin City in America. I mean, once we had a problem with our car in Virginia, which is so close to New York, okay? And we said, come on, can you help us? And they said, come on, why not? And when the guy saw that our plates were NY, he said, you go to hell, you New York. So America has a culture which is not a citizen in the sense of the city culture, but of open land. In America, the price of land is so low compared to Europe.
So much more.
Well, why America was populated? Because we didn't fit anymore. When in Ireland in 18, when was that? 87 or something. 25% of the population went away because they couldn't live anymore there. There were no place, no room for the agriculture to be productive and so on. The Kennedys, the Fitzgerald's Kennedys, and all the rest. What were they? People, flying away from Europe because you couldn't, you didn't have place there, room there. Okay?
So you might get the message that we are pro-Europe.
No, not only that, but that density is important.
I'm interested in,
I agree with that.
in your experience having worked and lectured and taught in America, at least 2 interludes in your life, maybe more.
In New York, I was taught, and in Baltimore, I was teaching.
What were the lessons? Were there good practices or lessons you brought back that influenced you as mayor of Barcelona?
Well, I was in Baltimore. In New York, I was learning, of course, a new school for social research was influenced by the German political migration, Jewish people and political migration from Europe produced the new School for Social Research. Now, there I put up my dissertation thesis about prices of land. Okay. And then when I came back to Baltimore, that was different because I was teaching them about the same thing, about the same themes. In the meantime, I had become from a Marxist to a more, let's say, liberal. That comes with age, probably.
Yeah.
But of course, in the moment when we went to America, we were very much under the effect still of dictatorship. So it was 71, 73, no? And that influenced us very much. Then we became Keynesians, and I am still, which is almost nobody is nowadays, but I am still.
But also I'd hazard a guess that as mayor of Barcelona, you probably have more power than the mayor of London has because of the federal system.
Because?
And because of the federal system and because of the more devolved government that you have in Spain. And the question really about whether or not Barcelona could have been as successful in a state as centralised as Britain is, and whether or not there are real dangers here for London in terms of really grasping the full advantage of the games without that kind of the power and the finance and the ability to really focus on the games of Barcelona.
I don't know. In Barcelona, as I said at the beginning, the games became a motto for everybody. Yes, it was. People realized that that was the way to be better, which is very much. It's much more difficult for London to think of the games in those terms, probably. You know?
But the amazing thing is that you've had three great mayors who more or less worked together, and is very difficult, I think. That's very unusual to have Sarah,
one after
yourself,
the other.
Klaus.
Yeah. That is true.
20 years of more or less joint policy, strategy.
That is true. That is true.
And
Because all of us were aware of the fact that for us that was the way. I mean, the only issue, the only way out. No. Yeah.
But that's the strength of a political vision, isn't it? That's as robust as Barcelona's.
I have to say that just as when Ruthie and I were in Spain, in Barcelona, we used to invite Maragall for lunch or whatever, and you always had the three mayors. I thought it's fantastic. You've got three mayors. I mean, the one before, the one together every time. It was a bit like the Marx Brothers. I have to say. You got the whole lot.
But as I said, in Barcelona, this consciousness of the fact that the events were the base of its capacity to be something in the world was so important that then, not only in the Olympic Games, but twice before, in 1888 and then in 1929, Barcelona staged big events, universal exhibitions and all of that. The difference was that all of the things that were done in Barcelona were made in 1988 and then in 1929 for the occasion. So that when the games of 1992 came up, and we began to use those big buildings in Montjuic, for instance, the palace where you came that day with your mochila, and those buildings were done for the occasion without foundations. The Olympic Stadium of 1929 was put like that on the floor, I mean, without foundations. The National Palace, which is the place where we were staging that event, same thing. Yeah. So that in due time, this being a city made up of events became really a serious problem, because nothing was seriously put in the land, okay? It was just staged over the land. So that the Olympic Games of 1992, the inauguration, was preceded by an act with King Juan Carlos and a bunch of people, of important people. Now, 15 days before, in another event in Palacio Nacional that you know very well, the ceiling fell down on the floor, okay? Because there was no base foundation, so that it was a building put on the floor without foundation, and we had to make a thuncho. You know what a thuncho is? It's like that, like
Belt.
a belt, but an iron belt, putting together the claraboya. What is the claraboya? Claraboya, how do you call it? They open the ceiling. There is a hole in the ceiling. ¿Cómo es dice una claraboya? Claraboya en inglés. Well, it's an open space in the top of the building. Okay. Now, with a belt,
Oculus.
an iron belt in this ceiling, during the games, this thing, this building stood. Guy Aulenti was the one to put it up, to more or less arrange it, okay? Now, and I am very grateful to her because of that. Now, all of the buildings were put like that. The day the beginning of the game, before the beginning of the games, we staged a proof event. And the stadium was not really ended. The stadium also was put, Gregotti was there working, was put on the floor without foundations, so that the day the enlargement of the stadium was inaugurated, everything went bananas. I mean, it was inundation. It was a terrible thing. Diane and I, when it became the last to quit, I mean, they were alone. Samarang was enraged. I mean, this is a disaster. I tell you that because you will never go through such a kind of such tremendous problems. But still, you should have probably a bit of the spirit we had in terms of equaling the games as an occasion for the city to become better, which is what I have seen in you and your papers and the way you address this issue. It is very important that London understands that something is at stake for the city.
I think the choice of the East End is for the Olympics is 100% correct. In other words, that's where you need the regeneration, where you need to distribute what limited amount of wealth the government is willing to spend there, and where one can do massive improvements. It's interesting this balance between obviously the parts of London, and then England and Britain. We only lately have got some form of regional separation, especially if we look at sort of Scotland, Wales, and now they even appear to be getting somewhere with Ireland. And that's moderately new. And then now we're beginning to get city leaders. There are only one mayor. So that's really, in the end, it's a relationship between the parts and the whole. It fascinates me about Spain is that whereas Barcelona, without doubt, is the most exciting in terms of a regeneration, it is very much the spirit of the culture of Spain, of which Barcelona is part of, which excites Europe. Because I would suggest that in terms of certain urban culture, and one may well go for political culture, Spain is today the most interesting country in Europe.
I think you have grounds to say that, I mean, that I will not deny. But, well, our economic growth is substantial, that is true.
You have something like 50% women in the parliament, don't you?
Well,
we have some way to go.
No, that's another question.
No, it's not.
We were talking about economic growth. And so
no, it's social.
No, myself, I am not anymore a member of a party whatsoever. So that even if, of course, I am faithful to my leftish kind of spirit, but I think that, as I said to you before, that in Europe we need an American way of thinking in terms of forgetting about this. Forgetting about this division of in 100 political parties.
We don't have it in Britain.
Well, you don't have it. That's true. Now, I think that really in Spain what we have now is a real possibility of being what we never were, which is someone in Europe. After 1492, or no, after what? After Francis Drake, let's say, when we began to go down. And when Keynes said, Keynes produced magnificent pieces about the relationship between Spain and in Britain, okay. And this was one. What the fact that you succeeded us, let's say it this way, Britain succeeded Spain in being the great power, no? And I think it is very important that we understand, both British and Spaniards, that first, the quality of our life will depend on the existence of two levels of, let's say, action, public action. One is cities, very important, because if we are good at that, we are good at the most important thing of them all. And the second is the union. And that for you is less evident, for the British
Definitely.
in general. But you should be beginning to think in another,
I agree.
another dimension. Otherwise, well, Britain alone, or Spain alone, or Italy, or even Germany, wouldn't be able to stand the world competition nowadays.
I agree. Totally.
I think at this point, it'd be interesting throwing open the discussion a bit wider than just the three of us on the platform. So, are there any questions? I think we've got a roving mic, haven't we?